How are you today, Lee?
Hi, I'm good, Hannah. How are you?
Good. I'm Hannah. I'm the Nitpicks brand director, and I'm here with
Lee, the Nitpicks graphic designer. And we're here live talking to you today. Knitters, I hope you're well.
Welcome back. We do these every week now, which is so much fun. I'm glad that we're able to get together and talk about yarn every week.
Yeah, we don't get to talk in the office about yarn every day like we normally do. So we can get together from our homes, which are also filled with yarn. So that works.
So filled. I've been getting all of our the special secret packages from our mills at my house now.
Ooh, oh my gosh. I've seen a few pictures. I'm very excited.
Yeah, there's some really exciting things coming. I can't wait for the next few months to roll around and then to be able to share all the cool stuff that's now in my house and I get to play with, and soon everyone will be able to play with.
Nice. And I got some of the new upcoming books delivered to my house, which was very exciting.
Did you?
Yeah.
So what are we talking about today, Lee?
So we're going to talk about yarn labels, like everything that you see on a yarn label, what it all means, what to think about for a project, what matters to you, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and we realized as a yarn company that is only online, so Nitpicks is our yarn is only online, and you can't see it ahead of time for the most part.
Right. You can't feel it and squish it and look at it in person.
And see the yarn labels. So we use the yarn labels in the office all the time to help identify a specific color or a line. And that's some of the information that's on a label. And this is the same information that you'll find on a lot of yarn labels just across the industry. So if you're at a yarn shop, we should have the same information on our labels that they have on their labels. So it's pretty consistent as long as you know what you're looking for. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. And all yarn, no matter what, if it comes in a hank like this, or a ball like this, or a skein like this, they're all going to have a label. They might be wrapped differently or differently shaped, but they should all have that same information on them.
Right. And a yarn label might look different. So again, with the different shapes that yarn comes in, the label has to be a different shape in order to stay on and stay nice. Yeah. So do you want to walk through those just a little bit longer?
Sure. Yeah. So sometimes if it's on a hank, it's just kind of looped and connected like a tag, kind of like this, or it might be looped around the whole yarn like this one is. Or if it's in a skein, then it might be wrapped around the whole thing. I also have a roving where it's wrapped around the whole thing like that. Or if it's a ball, then it might be kind of looped, and in that case it has like these arrows at the end that helps it stick in and not fall out, so it's not actually connected or glued together. It's just this weird double arrow shaped thing which sticks in there.
Yeah. And then I know, Lee, that you mentioned because you have a long history of working with many different kinds of yarn, you tend to save your labels. How do you save them? Do you save them in the ball, maybe when you hank it up, or wind it up into a ball with using a ball winder in Swift, or what do you do?
I'm not a very organized person, as we talked about last week. I try to be. So I have like a box that usually during a project, I usually have, like I showed last week, like a tote bag of all the yarns that go with that project, and then the ball bands or labels or tags will go in that tote bag. So I try to keep everything for a working project kind of together in one place, like the yarn that I haven't yet used and the ball bands for the yarn that I'm using, all in a bag or in a corner of my couch or whatever. and then I have like a box that I'll throw labels of projects that have been finished. And so I used to design, and I felt like I needed to keep all the labels for past projects, like just in case I forgot something about them. And it did come in handy a few times. Like an old design was like, oh shoot, I didn't write that element, that one thing on the yarn label, like I didn't like the color number or something, or I need to find that. So I would dig through the box and like find the old label. So I'm still in the habit of always throwing labels for finished projects in a box, even though I'm probably not ever going to need them after the project's over. You can probably recycle them after you're done knitting. Yeah.
Yeah. And then as we're talking about all of these things today, feel free, if you're watching, to chime in with any questions and we'll answer them as we go. I noticed that Beth said hello. So hi, Beth. Something about
Tracy and Emma
are they
and
all
Kathy.
Aw. Well, welcome everybody. When I
Marilyn
take a yarn from its original shape and I wind it into more of a cake with our ball winder and Swift, I tend to then take the label, fold it in a couple of times, like into thirds or so, and then I put it in the center of the ball, or I kind of wrap it around the outside and wrap last couple of feet of the yarn around it just to hold it in place, just so I know what it is and it kind of stays together as long as possible. I also make sure I put it in Ravelry when I start a project, so I try and get as much information in. I don't put the quantity in because I like to weigh my project afterward. I can't keep track of how many balls I've used usually, but what's nice is that Ravelry does have a lot of the information, and all of our yarns are on Ravelry already. So you can type in, for example, Hawthorne into Ravelry and it will come up with all the information built into it. So with that said, let's start talking about what's actually on a ball band.
All right.
Yeah.
Grab one of these.
So no matter what shape it is or where you get it from, they will generally have the same information on it. Yes.
So here's the front of this one. This is one of our new labels. Our older labels are going to say Knit Picks big on the front. That's an old one.
And there's some even older labels. This is our third generation.
That was a really yeah. If you're a longtime fan, you'll see many generations of labels. So that's the yarn family there, Comfy Color Mist. And then the weight. Weight is big and prominent right on the front because that's one of the most important things about a yarn is what weight it is. And then down there below, you got the color name.
So Notebook is this colorway.
That's Notebook, And then you have the yards and the grams. And our yarns are always going to be either 50 or 100 grams. But other companies might go more by. So all yarns have a number of yards to number of grams. And that's like a ratio related to their weight and their fiber type. And so we always have either 50 grams or 100 grams, which means
except a couple of them are bigger. So Bravo 500 is 500 grams. So there's a couple other putouts, but always grams and yards.
Yeah. So it's always like an even number of grams, right? Like the number of grams is like the number that we go by. So it's always like a round number, which means that the yards is usually going to be not a round number. So in this case, it's 219. So other yarn companies, they might go by like, it's always 150 yards, which means the grams might be like a wonky number.
Right.
So always one of them will usually be like a nice round clean number and the other won't be because of that ratio. Something to be aware of.
So
that's everything on the front. Do you have other things to say about those things?
I do. Let's talk about just quickly. So when we talk about a yarn family is generally at Knit Picks, it means that we use the same base, which means it's maybe the fiber type. So in this case, Muse has several different color versions or subfamilies, but Muse is the umbrella because it's the same yarn base. So what we're saying is, like, if you pick a Muse yarn, they should all go together if they're the same weight. And in this case, Muse fingering weight, which is lighter than worsted. Muse also has a heavier version. So what we use the families to talk about, like a group of yarns that's kind of like, I use the analogy of like dogs versus cats, like they're different species, but they're all animals. So this is all yarn, but like a loft is another family, and that's a lace weight, so it's a different weight.
Stroll's a good example because this is a Stroll sock lab, but there's also Stroll tonal and Stroll hand paint and Stroll tweed.
Yeah, Stroll tweed, yeah. So you've got a couple of different color versions you can work with, but the family should all be about the same thing. And then when we talk about yarn weights, so we're going to talk about yarn weights really quickly, Lee. So we've got yarn generally goes for knitting yarn goes from lace weight. Then that's the very finest. So that's for very fine lace shawls and things like that. Then it's fingering weight, which is more socks, lightweight sweaters, shawls can be fingering weight. They can be also other things, but that's generally the buckets that they fit into. Then you've got sport, which is like a heavier fingering, and that's socks can still be in that. More garments appear when you get into the sport weight category. Worsted, I would say, is like
DK.
Oh, DK, yes.
DK first. DK is like a light. It's between sport and worsted, so it can be very close to sport or very close to worsted, or it can be kind of the same as like a light worsted, depending on. Yeah,
nice in between category. And again, that's also good for like sweaters and things like that, and accessories. And then worsted weight gets a little bit heavier, and I feel like the most common things you'll see in yarn stores will be lace, fingering, worsted, bulky. So worsted, is like I use that mostly for sweaters or blankets, things like that. It's starting to get into blanket territory a little bit faster.
Accessories, hats, scarves, cowls.
And then you've got Aran or heavyweight, and then bulky, and then super bulky, and then it gets into the crazy town territories of just mega yarns, like roving giant yarns. So we're not going to get into that territory, but that's generally the gamut of sizes that you'll work with. And it will be denoted on the label. And so yes, it'll have fingering weight, or the terminology might be different. I know baby weight is another thing. In Europe, they use other words for some of the same designations. So
it's like ply, like 3-ply, 4-ply.
Right. And crochet also will go a little bit into a different direction in the way that they describe the same concept. So there's the weight of the yarn is the thickness. And a couple of things that are clues, if you're not sure what like baby weight means or fingering weight, and you've never heard that term before, on the front, you will again have the yards to grams, right? As Lee talked about. So you can see like, oh, if it's 100 grams and it's got about 350 yards, you know it's probably going to be a fingering weight yarn, because exactly, so 462 yards. It's a good way of figuring out just like how fine the yarn is. And then that takes us to the back of the label. So let's go to the back and let's talk about gauge and needle sizes. Yeah. So on the back of the label, you've got things like what size needles you should use. So that's the top row on our labels. And it's got needles on the left. So it says needle size 1 to 3 will get you 7 to 8 stitches per inch. So that's a good clue that it's a finer weight yarn than perhaps a bulky yarn, because a bulky yarn would say something more like on size 8 to 9 needles, and you'll only get maybe 3 or 4 stitches per inch. And again, there's the crochet designation next to that. And then below that is the fiber type. And the Craft Yarn Council little icon for the weight as well. So that's another way of saying the same thing. So a fingering weight is also a 1. That's that little graphic with the 1 on the yarn label. They have their own metrics, and we include these here because that is a little bit more of a universal way of saying the same things. In this case, we've got 80% superwash merino wool and 20% nylon, which shows you that it's a sock yarn because the nylon's in there for springiness and washability, superwash as well. And we can go into fiber types all day. Ask any questions you have. I would love to answer them, right? And Lee too. And then we've got washing instructions there. So this is, I would say, I use these as the guideline for what is the worst thing I could do to this yarn and have it still look pretty good. I would say that always, if you want your knits to look as good as possible forever and ever, I would hand wash them always and lay flat to dry. But with this yarn, you can machine wash it and tumble dry low, and it will look excellent. It will just last longer, just like your commercial garments and things like that you buy in a store. If you hand wash it and lay it flat to dry, it will last so much longer than the washing machine. But you can wash it and it will still look really good. And then there's always the contact information below. And there's 2 extra pieces of information I'm going to let Lee talk about, which is the lot number and then the SKU number, or like the colorway number. Do you want to talk about that?
Okay, so up here, beneath the barcode, is the SKU. So Hannah, correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
the SKU number is kind of mostly for us internally. It's not so much for you, unless you're like maybe calling into customer service or something. It's always like a reference number that you can use to reference the yarn if you need
Sure.
to,
It's
or look it
basically,
up on the website.
so you've got the colorway name, right? So it's like, which one is this, Lee?
This is the Sock Lab Angelfish Tonal.
Angelfish. I really like this series of aquatic
Yeah,
things.
I love this one. It's so bright.
It's so bright.
I love it. It matches my earrings. I just realized.
So in this case, you can call it, if you want to call into customer service, or if you wanted to remember what this colorway is, you can call it Angelfish, or you can call it by that 25, let's see, what is it? 28543. And that is a really easy way for us to keep track of it within our systems, as far as like, it's basically the same thing as the name.
Yeah, so it means not just Stroll tonal sock gloves, but Angelfish tonal specific. Like it's the very specific number that means this exact yarn, not any other version. Like
that, well, that colorway. And then you get to the lot number, which means it is that particular dye lot that this skein came from.
Yeah, so the lot number is more
so down the bottom.
Yeah. Down here. So that, like Hannah said, that is when it was dyed, the lot that it was dyed with. So all yarn labels with this exact lot number should exactly match each other. If you're doing a garment or something with multiple skeins, they should be exactly the same color because they were literally physically dyed together in the same lot. Whereas a different yarn with that same SKU and that same color name, but a different lot number, you might see a slight variation. If you're knitting a sweater and you switch from one to the other, you might see a little bit of difference between those two. You'll want to stagger a stripe back and forth between the two for a while, so it's a clean blend instead of a hard line.
Right. And we actually have, if we want to take a second, Philip has chimed in with a really good comment, the way that he stores his yarn labels and also keeps track of everything. So he saves one yarn label or a multiple if he's using many colors from each completed project. And then he wraps a piece of yarn around each label to remember the weight and fiber content and washing instructions. And then that little piece that he's wrapped around the label, he can use that to repair his garments afterward, right? So I do that with socks, but I almost never do it with sweaters because I figure like, I'm gonna get some more of this later. Yeah, and then he just keeps the labels attached to anything he hasn't used yet, which is what I do as well. I think that's a good call, good rule there, is to just keep everything together as much as you can, because there's nothing worse than trying to retrace your steps and figure out what this mystery skein is.
Yeah, just yesterday, I have it right here. I had like a big swatch for a project that I frogged to reuse the yarn. It's this weird, chunky, fuzzy, like I have no idea what it is. I have no memory of where I got it, or I'm assuming it's like a wool blend because it feels like wool, and that's as much as I know. That's
right.
it.
Right. Yeah. So I think paying attention to the yarn label is a really good place to start for somebody who's new to knitting and learning what some of those cues are. I want to talk about, so we talked a little bit about yarn weight. So the weight of a yarn is important. Your pattern, if you're working from a pattern first, it will tell you kind of what weight of yarn usually to look for it. It will also tell you which yarn the designer used to make that project. So like what they recommend, like they had the most success with this one and they recommend that. So if you can either match that yarn or match the weight and the fiber content to get it as close to the original as possible, that's always how I go about it.
Unless you have a vision for what you want that's different, but you need to know the qualities of like I want to use this different fiber content instead because I want it to be like more drapey or something, and you have enough experience that you can kind of picture what it's going to look like. You don't have to do exactly what the designer did, but it's a good starting point. And if you want to make a garment or an item that looks like the sample that you're seeing, you want to use the same yarn.
Right. What else? I think that's about all I have for that. We can talk a little bit about different fiber contents if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, I think an in-depth discussion about fiber content is a
It's a
good
whole
topic
nother
for
thing.
another day.
Yeah.
But if anyone has any specific questions, go ahead and ask them and we
Mhm.
can answer here
Yeah.
while we're all together in one place.
I know, it's special time. And then this, I would say that this conversation is also, this is the second time that we've kind of talked about this topic, but last time we talked about it, it was on the podcast. So we have a podcast that comes out every other week. And we basically, this time we took an episode, we're like, oh, we really enjoyed talking about this. And we thought it was really important. And we want to talk about it again, but in a place where we could actually show some examples instead of just describe them without anybody being able to see what we're talking about.
Yeah, and there's also, I think, an accompanying blog post too with a visual if you want to see still photos of what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's we've got the anatomy of a yarn label on there, so everything is kind of drawn out, so you can refer back to that and really sit and kind of process what all these pieces look like instead of having us show you something on the camera really up close.
And I'm not, as I'm doing that, I'm
Yeah.
not knowing the resolution on people's actual Facebook screens if you can actually read the things we're
right.
So.
But the anatomy of a yarn label's there, and especially if you're looking at that while you're listening to this, because this gets saved on the timeline. It's a really good way of learning some of the basics of a yarn label, and also refreshing if you've been a little rusty, or you just never knew what like a single part of this meant. Maybe like you never knew what the lot number meant or why it was important. Yeah, and I think that's it. So you can join us every week. Every Thursday, we'll be here talking about something different. If you have an idea for something you'd like us to talk about, go ahead and chime in the comments and we'll look at those and look for inspiration there, because every week I feel like we're always like, what do we talk about now?
we have seen some of your ideas
Yes.
out there when we've asked before, and we've seen ideas for technique tutorial kind of stuff, which we need to figure out a good setup to make it, good, to make it so it's helpful, so you can see what we're doing. So we're not just like holding our yarn like this.
Right.
So it's this whole working from home remotely thing is new for everybody. So we need to figure that out. But yeah, I would love to do like a Kitchener stitch tutorial.
I saw steeking in there somewhere. Lots of sock questions.
Yeah.
And we do, for anybody who has the sock questions, we do have a really good series of a class that Stacy has done with the Learn to Knit Socks, I believe, or it's the Go Your Own Way socks on our YouTube channel. And it should answer most of your questions in there. So that's a really good place to refresh. And we will always share our good classes and tutorials with you as we can. In the meantime, so check back here every Thursday. We'll be here streaming to you live.
Oh, Lisa wants to know what we're wearing, and this is a hand knit. It's knit, and this is my leftover skein from this. This is an older yarn, but it's simply wool, but held double because it's a bulky weight pattern. So so we were talking about matching the yarn to the pattern. So the pattern called for a bulky weight 100% wool yarn. So I use the same fiber content, 100% wool, but I use a worsted weight held double, and I did a gauge swatch and to make sure the gauge would match. We didn't talk about gauge swatching as something.
Right.
Just because, that's actually really good.
Sure.
Just because a yarn label says a gauge and a needle size, just because the label says on size 8 needles, you get 5 stitches per inch, doesn't mean you are going to get 5 stitches per inch on size 8 needles. Yeah, everyone knits differently. So that's what it says is a guideline for like a lot of people would get this gauge with this needle, but you always want to do a gauge swatch to make sure it's going to work, and then you get a sweater.
I am a notoriously loose knitter, so I always have to go down 3 needle sizes no matter what it says.
Wow. I started out as a really tight knitter, and then I forced myself to get looser so my hands would stop hurting, and now I'm like, I think average-ish.
Yeah. There's some weights where I have better luck than others, and I know it, and after practice I've just figured it out. But like anything under a worsted weight, forget about it. I got to go all the way down to microscopic needles for socks, things like that.
Right. And Marilyn is asking about our earrings. Can I talk about
about your earrings?
My earrings are needle gauges, and they're amazing. And I got them at a Fiber Festival, Yarn Stitches Festival, and I don't remember the company off the top of my head, but I'm gonna find it and I'm gonna post it in the Facebook comments because they're awesome.
I love those earrings. I'm so glad
they're functioning. And half the sizes are one and the other half are on the other. So between the two, you have all the sizes.
Oh, that's fun. I will also post what these are. Some other I can't remember, but I just got them recently around Christmas as a treat to myself.
Nice.
Yeah, and this is not a hand knit sweater, but it is my most beloved commercial sweater, and I definitely have plans for trying to recreate it one day before it dies because it's getting pretty holey. But I've been fixing it. In the meantime, it's still it's such a good sweater. So yeah,
cool.
Yes. Okay.
Right. Thank you for those questions.
Yeah.
Oh, what's your favorite yarn, Regan? We can't.
Regan. So Regan is our photographer, right?
He posted it and then immediately deleted it.
We can still answer it. What's your favorite yarn?
That's like asking what my favorite color is.
Fiber
I don't
type?
have an answer for that. Fiber type wool.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought it'd be a safe answer for you. Yeah. I am really digging Aloft, which is our mohair silk blend, held alongside something else.
Ooh.
I've got
I was doing it right now. This is Hopper and Aloft held together.
It's beautiful.
Halo-y.
I was inspired by, I think, is it Petite Knits? She's been doing a lot of stuff with Aloft held, or a mohair held with another yarn, and it's just blowing my mind how beautiful it is. I'm so excited. Yes. It's lovely.
That's Aloft. So it's a lace weight. It's great held with something because that fuzzy mohair halo kind of wraps around the other yarn. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay.
Okay.
Well, we could talk about this all day. I feel like we should have Knitter Cam that's just on, and we just filter whoever's asking questions and just answer them all. But for this week, I think we're going to wrap it up, and you can catch us on the Learning Center where we've got all of our tutorials and things on the website. We also have our blog where we post regularly. We have our Facebook group, Together We Knit, and this video will be posted in there soon. And also, it's a huge community of people who are just so excited about knitting, and we really love having everybody there. And we've got our podcast, which is every other week. The next episode will be next week. So maybe this time next week, we'll have a podcast episode we can just mention an actual title for. But you can find that also on any streaming platform you have, or also on the website and Instagram, as always. Yeah. So until next week, I will see you then.
Hey, have a good weekend, everybody.
All right. Bye.
Bye.